Hello there, you're very welcome into NCBI's Technology Podcast. This is episode number 21 for February 2014. My name is Stuart Lowler. Thank you very much for downloading and subscribing to our podcast. Hope you're going to stay with us for the next 46 minutes, where Kerry Doyle will be telling us all about Flexi VO, a new variant of the popular Flexi iOS app. I show you a new app for your iDevice called Downcast, which allows you to subscribe to and manage your podcast feeds. We'll be talking to our tech support officer, Paul Traynor. It's really good to have him back on the podcast, and he talks about lots of different things, including the new Window Eyes for Office. And finally, Dr. Esther Murphy from the Centre for Inclusive Technology is with me to chat all about a new initiative called DICE. That's all coming up on this month's edition of NCBI's Technology Podcast. Thank you to everybody who got in touch with us with feedback from our January podcast. It's always nice to get those emails, technologypodcast@ncbi.ie. You can also contact me by phone by calling NCBI on 830-7033 or our local number 1850-334353. Now, we had a lot of interest in cavitraining.com and the interview we did with Sean Randall, all about that huge range of courses that are available from Cavi Training. And if you're listening to this at the very beginning of February, you probably just have a day or two to get registered if you want to join the February semester of those online courses. And you will have known, of course, from the January podcast that at least two of those courses are running at nice times for those of us in Ireland and I guess Western Europe. If you want to explore that, Derry Lawler sent us an email to say he enjoyed the podcast and interested to hear about Raspberry Pi. He said, I don't know what it is, and he enjoyed hearing about the accessible car racing game and said there's a racing game called Railroad, which he'd be interested in playing. Have to have a look at that at some point. We had somebody else actually called me on the phone to ask me about Raspberry Pi, and the Raspberry Pi is a tiny little cut-down computer that runs essentially on a microchip. So what I think we'll try and do is get somebody to talk to us a bit about Raspberry Pi in the next few months and find out a bit more about it, how accessible it is, and what are its maybe uses for people within the home, because I know, for example, it can be used as a media center. So I'll try and get somebody to talk about that on the podcast in a couple of months. Now, to flag something for you on our March edition, a very long-awaited feature and something that we've been planning for a couple of months, and that's a panel discussion all about low vision and technology. We have brought together 3 low vision panelists and a low vision compare or chair for this discussion, and it's going to be well worth listening. I think this discussion is well underway in terms of preparation work, so we're going to be bringing those people together to record over the next couple of weeks rather, and I'll be very much looking forward to bringing that to you on the March edition of our podcast. Now, as always, if you have comments, feedback, suggestions, anything at all, please send an email to technologypodcast@ncbi.ie. You're listening to NCBI's Technology Podcast for February 2014. And back in August 2012, on I think podcast number 3, we introduced you to Flexi, a revolutionary way of typing on the touchscreen of your iDevice. And a number of people have used Flexi, especially in the visually impaired community, but over the last little while there have been some changes to the way in which Flexi is used. And recently, Flexi, the company, launched a new app called Flexi VO. With us to talk about Flexi and all things Flexi VO related is Kerry Doyle. Kerry, welcome back.
Hello, thank you for having me again.
So you talked to us about Flexi initially because you were certainly the person who told me about it. Just remind us again why it's so good.
Yeah, so Flexi is basically an app developed by a Greek company called Centellia, and it's basically a third-party keyboard. And what it allows one to do is to type very accurately and efficiently and quickly, I might add, on a touchscreen. As we all know, typing on touchscreens at the best of times can be a trying experience. I certainly found it very taxing before I had Flexi, and I had went away from and back to the iPhone and phones with talks, and Android and phones with talks again, and whatever. And then when I found Flexi, really that just kind of really changed the way that I typed on a touchscreen, and really has been what's enabled me to stay with an iPhone up to the present point, up to this very moment, really.
So it uses a kind of an I guess it tries to predict where your fingers will land, and it tries to approximate the words. Is that right?
So basically they have patented a system whereby it registers both the number of taps that you enter and also the proximity of your fingers on the keyboard to like where certain keys would be. So I suppose in order to use, anyone who would use this app would be, I would say, very competent touch typists, and so, which a majority of blind people are, I would say. So that's why there's no problem for one to use it, because you do know the label of the layout of the keyboard very well. So yeah, okay. That's the way it works.
So Flexi was there and working away, and then comes Flexi VO, which stands for Flexi VoiceOver.
Yeah.
Why the need for an additional app?
Yeah, I think what happened was as the app started to be developed, a lot of sighted users as well kind of latched on to the idea that, hey, this is a really worthwhile experience. This keyboard is fantastic, etc., etc. And what had started to happen in the past few versions is that the predictions and such were starting to not be as good. You would flick down for a specific word, having done what you thought was a correct approximation of the word, and you could be flicking down away for a long time and it just wouldn't get it. So what I imagine happened, because I personally didn't do this, but what I do imagine happened was that the developers got a considerable amount of feedback, obviously, from the majority of their users, which are visually impaired, and so they decided, hang on a second, we have to take action here, we have to do something, and so they decided to introduce Flexi VO, which is now available on the App Store. So.
Okay, so and Flexi, and we will actually put a link on the show notes to Flexi VO. So Flexi VO is right. It's an additional app. You can have it and Flexi on your phone together.
Yes, I do. Yeah, okay. I do. But I use Flexi VO now all the time.
Okay, and if you have had dictionary entries from Flexi, will they show up in Flexi VO?
They do. Yes.
Okay, so
yes.
So words you create in one app are
it transfers over, and I suppose. Basically what Flexi VO is kind of a return to what made Flexi great in the first place. Like, the predictions are fantastic. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but maybe there is a difference in how it's designed, how it registers taps or whatever. They could have gone back to some kind of old code or something. I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm not that technical, but it certainly is a huge improvement on the version of Flexi that I was using prior to when Flexi VO came out, which isn't that long ago actually.
Okay, and Flexi VO is free?
Yes,
okay.
It is.
And for a new, let's say, Flexi user right now, would you be saying Flexi VO over the let's say standard Flexi?
I would, yeah, especially if the person that's using it is a competent touch typist, and especially if if the person has limited or no vision. I'd say Flexi VO would be better for somebody than like the standard Flexi that's out there at the minute.
All right, check it out on the App Store. It's Flexi VO, VO standing for voiceover, of course. And Kerry, as always, thanks very much for giving us your time.
Thanks for having me.
Now, on last month's edition, in response to a couple of queries we had received about how best to access our audio feed, I started off by showing you two methods of using your PC to find our podcast. You remember we used Winamp, and you could either listen using Winamp directly and sitting at your PC, or you could use iTunes to subscribe to our podcast feed and have the podcast download automatically to your computer. Now, what if you are mobile and you're using a device that you want to carry around with you? You don't want to have to manually transfer podcasts to your mobile phone. Well, there's a great little app I'm going to show you today for the iPhone. And next month, I'll be showing you how to download and receive podcasts directly using the Plex Talk Pocket. There's a free Podcasts app that Apple have released, which you can get for your iDevice. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's not very intuitive, and there's not a great feature set. So, for example, it's not very clear all the time how to clear your subscriptions, how to delete content. It's just not the nicest app to use. What I do recommend, if you're happy to pay about €2, is a podcasting app called Downcast that lots of people have been using. It's not designed specifically for visually impaired, but it's fully accessible, and as you'll see when we open it in a moment, it's a really nice app to use. I have the iPhone 5 with iOS 7, the latest version of iOS 7, and the first thing I'm going to do is unlock my phone.
7:10 p.m.
Here we go.
7:10. When's unlock?
Let's unlock. And I have a folder called Media Apps.
Social calendar. Media apps folder.
There we
11
go.
apps. Media
And
apps.
I'm going
Heading.
to
Text
go
view.
to page 2 of this
Page
folder.
2 of 2.
And I'm going to find Downcast.
Spotify. iBlink rate. Downcast.
Here's Downcast. Now I'm going to double tap the Downcast icon.
Downcast. Edit button.
And I'm now in the Downcast app. In a moment, you're going to hear a little sound as Downcast connects to the internet and checks the RSS feeds. There we go. It's starting the check. Checks the RSS feeds that I'm subscribed to and goes to see if there's anything new for me to listen to. With Downcast, I can either listen directly, in other words, stream the podcast, or I can download the episode for later listening. So what I often do if I'm going on holidays or going on a plane journey or something like that, I'll go on to Downcast. There's we go. The app check or the check for new podcasts has finished. If I'm going on a long journey, I'll go on to Downcast. I will check for a new podcast, and then I'll download a whole load to bring with me. Let's look at the main screen. So if I swipe right...
Refresh today. 7:11 p.m. Double tap to refresh all podcast feeds.
So we could do that manual refresh now if we wanted. We don't need to because it's just refreshed, but I could do that if I wanted. Now I'll swipe right again.
Unplayed. Heading.
So here's podcasts that are unplayed. New podcasts in my subscriptions that are unplayed.
Best of Chris Moyles Enhanced. 1 unplayed. Last published 14/09/2012.
Now that podcast is a dormant podcast. It was not published since September 2012, but I've had it in my subscriptions for ages.
Focus Audio Magazine. 4 partially played. Last published 07/12/2013.
There's Joe Bollard's Focus Magazine, a podcast that we have for Focus, available at ncbi.ie/focus if you want to find out more about it.
Media Show. 8 unplayed. Last published today.
So the Media Show is a podcast from the BBC. It's all about the media. If you're interested in that, I highly recommend it.
NCBI Technology Podcast. 1 partially played. Last published 13/01/2014.
And there's our own technology podcast. Now, when it says that something is partially played, it means that I've started listening to it and then I stopped. And it gives the date then of the last published podcast. So it's telling me that the last NCBI podcast was published on the 13th of January, which is correct.
Ouch. Disability Talk Show. 1 unplayed. Last published 16/01/2014.
Now, here's a podcast worth subscribing to with the Ouch team and the producer Emma Tracy, of course, who has been on this podcast before.
RTE Acute. Callan's Kicks. 11 unplayed. 1 partially played. Last published 31/12/2013.
That's the Oliver Callan podcast, which I don't listen to a whole lot, actually. Let's go into one of these. Let's have a look at Ouch, okay?
Ouch. Disability Talk Show. 1 unplayed. Last published 16/01/2014.
So I'm going to double tap on Ouch.
Ouch. Disability Talk Show. Back button.
And I'm now in the podcast listing for Ouch, and it tells me that there's 1 unplayed.
Every month, Rob Crossan and Kate Monaghan present a program you didn't know you wanted to hear. It's disability from a fresh angle featuring interviews, discussion, and the occasional quiz.
That's the podcast description.
Ouch Show 104. Purple People. Status. Audio. Stream. Unplayed. Duration. 55:11. Published 16/01/2014. Heather Mills is out of the Winter Paralympics. Are the undoubtables really undoubtable?
Now, that gave me a number of bits of information. It told me the name of the podcast. It said stream, so that means it hasn't been downloaded, so I can stream it from my phone. and it told me the length and it told me the publication date, and then it started giving me a bit of a synopsis. We heard about Heather Mills, for example. If I want to play that podcast, I just double tap.
Back button.
And here's the Ouch podcast playing. Now, I have a standard player controls here.
It's podcast
volume 56%. Sleep timer forward. Sleep timer disabled.
I can use my sleep timer if I want the phone to switch, the podcast to switch off automatically.
Button.
And we'll pause this.
Play.
And we'll go back to the previous screen.
Ouch. Disability. Podcast player. Ouch show 104. Back. Ouch.
And then I just want to let you hear.
Ouch show 104. Purple people. Status. Now playing. Audio. Stream.
So it's now playing and it's partially played. Now, let's say I'm heading off on a plane. I want to bring that podcast with me. If I double tap and hold on it.
Alert. Ouch show 104. Purple people. Delete. Button.
I can delete it from the list. If I don't want to see it again, I can delete it.
Mark as played. Button.
I can mark it as having been played.
Convert to download. Button.
I can, when you hear convert to download, that's the option to download. So instead of having it as a stream status, I can convert it to download. If I was to tap that button now, it would automatically start downloading the podcast for me.
Cancel. Button. Ouch. Disability talk show.
And the cancel button will return us to the main screen, back to the podcast details. At the bottom of the screen, you have 5 tabs. The first of these is podcasts, and that's what we've just been looking at. And that shows the podcasts to which you're subscribed.
Playlists, tab 2 of 5.
The playlists allows you to make playlists of episodes across a whole range of podcasts. So, I want to listen to something from Ouch, and then I want to hear Joe's Focus, and then I want to hear something from Freedom Scientific. I don't want to have to go back to each podcast and select it. I want to make my playlist. You can do that.
Add tab 3 of 5.
The add tab allows you to do just what you would think, to search for a podcast title and add the feed to your device, and we'll do that in a moment.
Downloads tab 4 of 5.
The download tab allows you to track your downloads. So sometimes I might have 3 or 4 downloads going because I want to put a couple of podcasts on my phone, and I can go into downloads here and check their status.
More tab 5 of 5.
And the More tab is where you can control the app's settings, and there are many settings, and it's really worth exploring this a bit. There's a lot in this app, and I certainly won't do it justice in this review, but this is really just to show you what is possible. Let's go to add.
Download, add, play, add, tab, selected, add, tab, 3 of 5.
We're now in the add area.
Add podcast manually.
So you can add a podcast manually if you know the full URL of the podcast. So for example, if you decided you wanted to add let's say the Focus podcast, because the technology podcast, our podcast is in the iTunes store, but we haven't put Focus in the iTunes store yet. You would add www.ncbi.ie/focus.xml. That's the feed address. So you have to put that in if you're adding manually.
Search for podcasts.
Here we go. Search for podcasts. Let's double tap.
Search field is editing.
And we're in a search field. So I'm just going to search for the word technology. I'll just even put in tech.
FRTRSECH. Search.
And I'll tap search.
More. Tab 5 of 5.
And I'll now browse my results by just touching anywhere on the screen.
Tech Weekly. Status. Audio. Not subscribed. Published today. The Guardian's tech team with news and discussion from the digital worlds of technology.
Brilliant. Sounds good. Tech Weekly. Let's double tap it.
Add podcast. Search. Back button.
Now it's going to bring me into the podcast details. And interestingly, this will allow me to listen to it without actually subscribing. So, I can try it out for a while. I won't be subscribed to it.
Add podcast. Heading. Subscribe. Button.
There's the subscribe button. But if I don't want to do that.
Tech Weekly. Category. Guardian.co.uk. Link. Type. Audio. Feed URL. HTTP. Published. Today. The Guardian's tech team with news and discussion from the digital worlds of technology, gaming and the web. View episodes. Button. I
can view episodes here, and I can actually stream them and play them. So let's just
view episodes.
Do this.
Tech Weekly podcast. Usman hack on the Internet of Everything. Status. Audio. New. Unplayed.
So let's double tap it.
Alert. Download. Button. Stream now. Button.
And there's a Stream Now button, so I'm going to double tap that. And
preparing.
The Guardian.
There we go. Now I'm listening to this without subscribing to it. I could obviously
pause. Button.
Just turn that
Play.
off. I could subscribe to it if I wanted by hitting the subscribe button on the previous screen, and that would then add that Guardian Tech podcast to my podcast feeds that we saw earlier on in the very first tab of the application. So the app is called Downcast, Downcast. We'll put a link to it on the show notes for this episode. And it's definitely well worth getting. Spend a bit of time getting it set up to your liking, put in your podcast feeds, and it just does its thing every time you load the app. Next month, as I say, we'll be showing you how to receive podcasts using the Plex Talk Pocket.
In podcast number 1 in June 2012, would you believe, we met our technical support officer, Paul Traynor, the man whose voice is familiar to many of you on the phone when you ring NCBI's dedicated tech support line. And we're delighted to have Paul back with us again. Paul, welcome back.
Thanks, Stu. It's great to be here. I must say this is the first time I've ever been up in your office, so I feel a kind of an honour today.
Well, anyway, it's great to have you up. It's great to have you in Dublin. We've been chatting about lots of technology before we came on air, but we wanted to bring you back on the podcast. I suppose, first of all, just to remind listeners and people who might not have or might not be aware of the tech support line, tell us a bit about your tech support line first.
Yeah, my tech support line was set up in 1999, June 1999, and so it'll be 15 years in operation this June. And it's basically a place that people can call about general computer queries, including their access technology, such as JAWS or whatever, Zoom Text or some of the Dolphin products or anything like that, and anything dealing around the area of Windows XP, Windows 7 and now Windows 8.1. Any of those kind of things is fair game.
Okay, there's a sort of a general saying, we say it right across the organisation here within NCBI, ask Paul, and generally that's what we do. We will revert to Paul, so I highly recommend people contact Paul if you have any queries, and the number is 1850 923060. So today we wanted to talk to you about a couple of things, because Windows XP is going to be discontinued very soon, right?
Yeah, apparently Microsoft are going to discontinue supporting Windows XP in March. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to get up some morning in March, put on your computer, and your computer will no longer work. Windows XP will continue to work as it's always done, and your programs will work on it as well. But generally, I think what people most fear is that nowadays, with security being such a high priority on all your computers, people are doing a lot more online shopping and banking, and maybe paying bills and so on. And this is the area that I think we're all worried about. If Microsoft stop producing security updates and things like that, then the system, Windows XP itself, could become vulnerable to hacker attacks or malware viruses and other kinds of things that would cause security problems. So personally, myself, I would feel insecure about using my credit card or doing my banking details or even shopping online over Windows XP after March. I just would feel that way about it. That's a personal thing from me, but I would be, wary of it.
So while XP will still work, what you're saying is, yes, there is these, I suppose, possibilities that because Microsoft are not going to update the operating system anymore, you could be more vulnerable to attack if you're on the internet browsing around. And it is an old operating system, isn't it? Like
it is. It's really, I suppose it's It served well. Everyone has a real liking for Windows XP. It was probably one of the most favoured Windows operating systems ever to be produced by Microsoft. And people will find it hard to have to say goodbye to it, but you know, these things, I suppose, like everything else, have a shelf life, Stuart, and you have to be careful nowadays with, you know, what you're doing. And computers have become very, very much a part of everyone's life for doing so many things, and you have to be careful about what you're sending across the internet.
So for people who want to upgrade now, obviously they might be thinking about a new machine with either Windows 7 or 8. Do you have a preference on operating system at the moment?
Well, I suppose, yes. I mean, I would still say Windows 7 was a really good operating system. And if it were possible, I would probably always recommend that people, even if they're buying a brand new computer, that if possible try and get Windows 7 Home Premium or Windows 7 Professional, depends what, you know, capacity you're going to use it in. But Home Premium would be the one I would suggest. Now, it's not always possible or going to be possible to get Windows 7 as time goes by. It's now also a system that's been, you know, discontinued for the most part. But Windows 8.1 can be made to look like Windows 7 with a few adjustments. And so it is possible to use it. But I would also say here that you may have to upgrade your access technology. So if you're using something like JAWS 9 or JAWS 10 or even JAWS 11 or 12, you may have to upgrade to at least JAWS 14 or 15 now. 15 is the most recent version.
There was some additional enhancements, I think, in 15 to make Windows 8 a little bit more smooth, and probably more so Windows 8.1,
yes,
it came out last year. Okay, so generally we should be aware that XP is reaching end of life and making plans, if you haven't done so, making plans maybe to upgrade to a new operating system to keep your computer secure.
Yes, it's probably something you'd need to think about. All
right. The other thing, Paul, big news, I suppose, in January on the assistive technology front was the announcement by Microsoft and GW Micro, who make a program called WindowEyes, a screen reader, a collaboration to make this software free for people who use Microsoft Office 2010 and anything above. And you've been, I know, sort of having a look at this. Is it good? Is it worth the offer?
It was a bit of a surprise, I think, for the screen access technology world when this announcement came out that Microsoft, in collaboration with GW Micro, had decided to offer their latest WindowEyes product, which would be the main rival, I suppose, for the JAWS screen reader, to anybody who had a valid version of Office 2010 or higher. So that would be 2010 or now 2013. If you had this and you downloaded the WindowEyes from GW Micro, during the installation of WindowEyes, you would be asked for a WindowEyes serial number or your Microsoft product key. If you had either of these pieces of information, particularly the Office product key, because you would use this if you wanted to obtain a copy of WindowEyes free of charge. And I mean completely free of charge for a complete screen reader. No cut down at all. It's the full version. You put in the Office product key when you're asked for it during the WindowEyes setup, and it would accept it and go off and do whatever checking it does to validate it. And lo and behold, restart your computer, you now have a valid copy of WindowEyes installed on your computer.
And it's important to say, because I know somebody was querying, I saw an email recently that they were saying, does it only work in Microsoft Office? It doesn't. It works right across everything in Windows.
It's the full thing, Stuart. Yeah. It works. I was actually of the same opinion. I felt a bit sceptical, and I thought it was going to be some of this, as some people call it, crippleware, where it's designed to work in a particular area and nothing else. No, it actually works right across the board. In Windows 7 or Windows 8, you have a full 100% screen reader.
Okay. Now, It's interesting, isn't it? Because NVDA, and we've talked previously on this podcast about NVDA with Ronan McGurk. We were talking about Irish speech synthesis. And NVDA has been the free screen reader and very popular, becoming more popular over the last couple of years. Do you think this is going to impact on NVDA? What do you think about this, the way this landscape is changing?
I have to say I have a real love for NVDA. I think it's one of the best little screen readers that ever came out. It's so functional. It actually does certain things better than the paid screen readers do. And I have particular things that I do with NVDA that are just, great, and I love it for that. I don't think it will impact too much. I think this Windows Microsoft thing is probably, at the moment, is probably a kind of a flash in the pan sort of thing. And Windows, Stuart and I have talked about this many times. Windows is something, whatever is about Windows, you'll either love it or hate it. And I suppose we've come from using JAWS, as will the majority of totally blind people here in Ireland will have come from using JAWS, that they will find maybe Windows just not what they want or what they like. So NVDA, to be honest, I would feel nearly has more in common for me as a JAWS user than Windows would have.
So coming from that JAWS user interface, you might get better.
Yeah, there's just that feeling you get.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion, and we talked about it off air actually just before we came on here, about the idea of what this means for, let's say, universal access in the future, and the idea that the narrator screen reader could well become almost a mirror image of Windows if that's the direction Microsoft want to go.
Yeah, I hadn't actually thought about that until you mentioned it, Stuart, and I think you've probably hit the nail on the head, that this may be the shape of things to come, because Microsoft probably would feel that it's much more a better business decision to actually take something that's already there and implement it into their operating system, rather than setting up a whole new area of screen reader access within Microsoft. So it would probably make sense to go into partnership with someone like GW Micro and say, look, we want to use your screen reader to integrate into our operating system, as you were saying, narrator. And it's probably a business thing as well as anything else. It's going to get them off the hook, because, for years now, Microsoft have been slated for their lack of proper accessibility to their operating system. And this may be what they're planning to do. Windows has the capability to toggle itself over to a JAWS-style keyboard. So if you're used to using JAWS on your computer and you get a copy of this Windows, you can toggle the keyboard setting using Control Alt and 0, and Windows will adapt a JAWS-style keyboard layout.
Okay, so that is particularly useful, obviously, as I say, for people coming from JAWS, wanting to keep those JAWS commands, Control Alt and 0 to switch it over. Paul, before we let you go, going back to your tech support role and your phone line and stuff, people who might be ringing in for tech support, what's maybe the most important thing that they should know in order to maybe make the tech support call go as smoothly as possible? What are things maybe that you would need them to do when you get them on the phone?
Well, Stuart, a few of the things that I get sometimes people who ring me up and say, I'm not at my computer now, but can you tell me how to do A, B and C? Now, normally A, B and C could be something very simple, but in some cases it takes quite a bit of explanation to tell somebody how to change a setting in a particular area of their computer, or to fix an issue. And it really isn't much addition to try and explain it to them, hoping that they will be able to remember it all, and by the time they get to their computer, turn it on, and they've pretty much forgotten what I've explained to them. So it's probably always a good idea to be at your computer, and this goes for any technical support that you're ringing up, to be at your computer and able to carry out the instructions. Also, sometimes I get calls from people say, I've no sound on my computer, there's no, JAWS is not talking. And on a number of occasions I got this call, and it turned out to be that somebody had turned down the volume on their speakers. And it was just as simple as that. So just think about checking those little things, simple things first.
Okay, it reminds me of the old joke that's been around for years on the tech support thing, where somebody rings tech support and it turns out that the power is off or something. They say the screen's not working.
Yeah.
So.
The broadband has been turned off in the hallway or something.
Check the simple things first.
Yeah,
Paul, it's always good to catch up with you. Let's do it a bit more frequently. Thanks for coming on and talking to us. And hope we can keep in touch with you and talk very soon. Okay?
It's been a pleasure, Stuart. Thanks for having me.
You're listening to NCBI's Technology Podcast for February 2014, and I seem to be out of the studio right throughout this podcast episode because once again I'm in our Rehabilitation Training Centre in NCBI, and it's so nice this time to be catching up with Dr. Esther Murphy from the Centre for Inclusive Technology. Esther, welcome back.
Hi there, Stuart.
I think last time I talked to you we were speaking by phone about something very exciting that happened in Trinity College about a year ago.
That's right,
so I know you've been very busy since then.
That's right.
But today we're here to talk about, and I suppose in terms of this podcast, to launch a new and very exciting initiative that NCBI are pioneering called DICE. Tell me a bit about DICE.
Thanks, Stuart. Yeah, DICE stands for Digital Inclusion Champions in Europe, and it really is about creating an online peer support community for people with disabilities and people who work with people with disabilities in the community. So we are building a community face-to-face for starters, so I'm pretty much running around talking with lots of people in the community resource workers, IT, trainers, students themselves who are working, who are technology users, and educators, mainstream educators and employers. So it's a really big project.
So this is sort of digital skills. Just maybe try to just tell what are digital skills, maybe if we could try to sort of define that, or is it easy to define?
Sure, yeah, I guess it's all rooted in independent living. And if we consider the digital skills around this are the tools that enable people to get on in life, really, we're thinking of it as broadly as that. And in terms of our own training centre here, I guess that's maybe a nice place to start, because, as you know, I've worked here with yourself as an adult education tutor. And one of the things I would have observed are students helping each other. That's the heart of it. Students helping each other with their technologies, whatever they may be it their phone, be it accessing their laptop or PC, using some assistive tools like the JAWS screen reader, and I guess people with a little bit more experience helping others that are just getting started. That was one of the kind of starting points for this project, to kind of how would you sort of harness that lovely learning that happens informally, perhaps in the formal setting of a training centre. What are the digital skills? They are the skills of using different types of digital technologies, your phone and your laptop, and also, like, I was asked recently by a mainstream educator, when you go away to college, like, what about just preparing your meal? Independent living. If I wanted to make something, I wanted to use a thermometer. I want one that reads to me because I can't see the gauge. And I was asked, is that considered a technology?
Okay.
Or indeed, a partner asked, what about a digital alarm clock?
Yeah.
So we really aren't limiting it. It's really the technologies that people use in order to lead independent lives, and particularly in terms of their education, accessing education.
It's interesting because even at our technology exhibition last year, Esther, one of the big talking points was some of the low tech, the aids that actually very basic maybe, but they do the job, and they're the things that people maybe find it harder to find sometimes.
Yeah.
So you're looking, let's say, for example, we're talking about somebody who wants to find out how to do a particular skill, or I wonder how this can be done, and maybe somebody previously has done this. You're looking for people to almost share their experiences online?
Yeah, it's a sharing of information about technologies. Now, of course, there's fantastic practices already happening. For instance, the VIPS email list. We're talking with people that work in the NCBI already. The idea of the project is to link in with good practices that are happening in the community and bring them together in this community, in an online space, So like the VIPs that people, maybe your listeners are part of this, that they're posting queries and getting responses from the community. Similarly, our own website is going to be reflecting the needs of the people. So we're also going to be using existing social media, Facebook and Twitter, and we're hoping to get on to LinkedIn as well, so that accessing the website isn't kind of a chore that you kind of say, I have to go onto the DICE site, and that you can be getting feeds through your existing social media and posting questions. At the moment, we really are at what we're calling the kind of requirement gathering stage, which is essentially just meeting people where they are in the community, holding focus groups and interviews with people and asking them what they would like this website to do above and beyond what already exists out there, and how we can make that happen, and talk with the developers who are in our project to respond to those needs.
The really interesting thing I've found about DICE, from chatting to you and chatting to Mark McGuinness, who's been on our podcast before as well, is that you're casting the net right out. You're not just looking at blind and low vision. You're going right out, aren't you?
Yeah, we are. This project is to link in with disability organisations and NGOs in the community and their service users. So, for example, last week I was out talking with people in Enable Ireland, service users, service providers. Now, sometimes what we do is I might run a group of service users together, just talking with them about their needs, and we design questions for them. Then we'll feed those back to the developers. But at this particular situation, I decided we'd put everybody together and have a chat. And it was really fantastic to witness, Enable Ireland service user who actually was on a VIP list, and someone in the room who wasn't, and someone saying, well, what would DICE do? Would I be able to, would you do a blog? Would you do this? And I was saying to them, we will do what you would like us to do, and as far as possible, in order to provide peer supports for you guys, And what's important to say as well, we're linking in with employers. I've also been speaking with businesses in the community and various large IT companies, multinationals, who are coming on board with this as well. Now, what is there from their perspective? They see it as contributing to their corporate social responsibility. And they also, what we're interested in, again, is developing peer support relationship across employers in Ireland. So, for instance, there may be well-known companies that are a good example of hiring people with disabilities and providing the accessible technologies in order for them to fully fit into their workplace and conduct their job in the best possible way. And maybe there are smaller companies or companies that would like to hire people with disabilities more often, but maybe think this is quite challenging. Maybe the finances that we would provide the information on our site to enable employers to link with other employers who are doing a good job of this. So this really brings up the idea of the champion. The idea of a champion, a digital inclusion champion, is across all stakeholders involved in the project. Starting, if you think, the heart of the project are the students and the people. So, for instance, we all know people who are doing a good job as it is, who have excelled perhaps at their training centre or on a particular college course and are doing really well, and naturally become go-to people. You say like, you got to talk to Mary. She's really fantastic with the iPhone. Okay. She'd really help you. Yeah. Now that's that kind of individual space of a champion, of recognising people. Then there are obviously the workers themselves, and again coming back to the employer, that people would be recognised, and these champions we're growing this community of champions who will advocate and promote the DICE community, and also nominate new people to participate. It
strikes me as this sort of brilliant space where all these great conversations can happen between users and educators and employers and developers and anyone else who's interested in just getting the information out there and sharing all this vast amount of knowledge that exists in the disability community.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's a hub, really.
Okay. And I know there's a lot of, I suppose, exciting things planned over the life of the project. The website is, I suppose, what we should, for people who are listening right now, what can they do? If they're excited and they're listening to you, Esther, and they want to get involved, what should they do?
Yeah, absolutely. The more the merrier to get involved, really. The website is dice-project.eu, and on our website, just recently we've launched our online questionnaires. Now, these should roughly take 15 minutes or so, and we have designed different questionnaires for the different groups. So we have questionnaires for students and other technology users. We have one for vocational educational training, centre trainers and mainstream educators, employers, and one for NGOs working with people with disabilities and the unions. So one of the things that we really recognise that is such a team effort in the community to move people on from where they're at. Sometimes when they arrive, even at our own training centre here, people are in a space sometimes of limbo, and they're wondering what next steps to take. Maybe they've been working, maybe they've been out of work for a while, perhaps they were already in a further ed or university and they want to get back there. So it's about all the people who are responsible and in jobs that are enabling people to get back to where they want to go or move on to where they want to go in terms of education and the workplace. So what we feel is like having all of those people on board with us, cooperating together, is the way to go about this, And one of the things to say, if there's any service providers listening as well, please have a look at our website and fill in the questionnaire for us. That would be great.
It's something that I think is really exciting. I want to try and keep in touch with you during the life of this project. It's great that we're coming in at the beginning and we can kind of see how it's going. So for the moment, thanks a million for chatting to us, and let's talk very soon.
Cheers. Thanks, Stuart.
Many thanks to Dr. Esther Murphy there for chatting to us and telling us all about the DICE initiative. Really interesting, and let's watch that project and see how it unfolds over the next 2 years. Certainly something that I want to keep in regular touch with on the podcast. Remember the website, www.dice-project.eu. We'll stick that on the show notes for this episode. And there's also a questionnaire on that website that Esther and her colleagues at the Centre for Inclusive Technology would be very grateful if you would complete. Right, that's just about it for February's podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you so much for listening. Coming up in March, I've already flagged our low vision panel discussion. This is something not to be missed. And also, we're going to start a series of tutorials done by Kerry Doyle, all about using VoiceOver and the Mac. Until March, this is Stuart Lawler saying thank you for listening and goodbye.